future-proof. Dan starts to get odd visions. Perhaps it is time to see things differently. Future-proof. Future. Work. Door. Said. Vision. Home. Wrong. Dead. Confused. Nose. Dan woke up feeling cross. He'd had a dream. In it, Shania from next door had been by asking for some milk. Dan didn't like Shania. Her cat was a pain. Dan got out of bed and got dressed for work. There was a tap at the door. It was Shania. "Please, can I have some milk?" "No," said Dan. "Your cat has been bugging me all night. Go away." Dan slammed the door and stomped back to the kitchen. He put some milk in his coffee. "That was odd," he said. "It was like my dream." "My dream was a vision." He grinned at himself for being so silly. "As if I would have a vision," he said. He forgot about it and got on with his day. The next day, on his way to work, Dan went past a betting shop. He had a new vision. It was at a dog track. A dog in red and blue was winning. "I must follow this vision. That dog can win me some cash," Dan said. Dan went into the betting shop and put a bet on the red and blue dog to win. The dog won, and Dan was delighted. "This is fantastic. Bring on the visions," he grinned to himself. Dan's boss rang him. "Where are you? Are you coming to work today?" his boss said. Dan fibbed and said he was ill. Happy with himself, Dan collected his winnings. In a good mood, Dan went to see Dee, who ran his local pub. Dan liked Dee. He asked her if she would go out with him. "No thanks," said Dee. "I'm going out with Rashid. Have been for yonks." "Oh, I forgot that. OK," said Dan, a bit grumpy. The next day, Dan had a vision of Rashid asking Dee to marry him. Dan didn't want Dee to marry Rashid. He wanted to stop it from happening. Dan called his boss and said he was still ill. He felt a bit bad dropping them in it at work, but he needed to act on the vision. Dan waited by the pub. When he saw Rashid, Dan called out, "Oi, Rashid, I've seen a fella attempting to steal your car." Rashid ran off down the road. Dan went to see Dee. She was looking sad and a bit angry. "Rashid has stood me up," she said. As Dee began to get upset, Dan saw that he'd been selfish. He began to feel bad for Dee, and he did not feel good about himself. That vision hadn't helped him at all. At work the next day, Dan felt bad. He felt bad about Dee and Rashid and about missing work. He had a new vision. He saw 3 kittens in a box. It was raining. They were by the railway track. "Now I can do something good," Dan said. After work, he went to rescue the kittens. The kittens were exactly where Dan had seen them in his vision. He took them to the cat's home. Dan felt good. Dan then went to see Rashid to put things right. I'm sorry, Rashid. I was wrong about your car. Dee was sad that she didn't see you. Wedding bells must be on the card soon, right? I'm going to ask her now, said Rashid with a wink. Dan was feeling happy, but the next day he had a vision that Shania's cat was dead. He had a sinking feeling. Something bad was going to happen to the cat. Dan wanted to help the cat, so he tapped on Shania's door. "Hello, Dan," she said. "Hi, Shania. I need to ask, are you and your cat okay?" Shania looked confused. "You've always been a bit mean to me. What's different now?" she asked. Dan said, "Well, let's just say I've started to see things in a new way." "Oh, okay," Shania said, still a bit confused. They went in to look for the cat. Shania and Dan went to the kitchen. The cat was in its bed, dead. Shania started to cry. Dan understood he could not stop bad things happening. Dan wished he didn't have the visions. By the end of the next day, Dan hadn't had another vision. He grinned to himself as he cooked his tea. What happened to the cat yesterday had made him feel different about life, and the visions had stopped. Dan went back to the cat's home. "I've got a good home for those kittens," Dan said to the man at the desk. Dan put the kittens in a box and went home. All the way back, he had a big grin. It felt good to help the kittens and to help Shania. When Dan got home, Shania was in the garden. "I have a present for you," said Dan. "2 for you and 1 for me." Shania looked at the kittens and gave a big grin. Everything felt okay at last. Who knows what the future will bring?